Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm McKenna from Murder by the Book in Houston. Thank you all for joining us this evening. You've seen quite a bit of us this week. I think we have 12 authors for 6 events, but the great thing is there's a different audience for each one of them. So we're looking forward to this tonight. One of our favorite books last year was Erica Ruth Neubauer's first book in this series, and we're very excited to have her back for the brand new release, the second one, Murder at Wedgefield Manor. A few things before I bring the authors on. We'll be back tomorrow. John will actually be interviewing Carrie Barrett, one of our UK authors, at a 1 o'clock event. Her book is very Rebecca-esque, and John has been a huge fan of it. So if you can, tune in for that. And I'll be back tomorrow night with Kent Harrington and Gary Phillips in conversation. Also, we'll be shipping out our Murder by the Box Cozy Corner subscriptions early next week. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to murderbythebox.com. Best of the Month will be a few days after that, and then Crime Fiction Legends a few days after that. A note about Independent Bookstore Day. It's April, which means it's Independent Bookstore Day month. April 24th is this year's Independent Bookstore Day, and we're celebrating by hosting the Mystery Writers of America Best Novel Authors. So that's going to be at 1 o'clock here on Facebook and YouTube. We will be joined by authors all over the world. It's going to be super cool. I'm very excited about it. And we also just received our limited edition Independent Bookstore Day tote bags that are $10. And the pictures don't do them justice. They're really, really beautiful this year. So if you collect those or you like bookstore tote bags, I highly recommend checking those out. All right, let's get to the authors for tonight. First off, we've got Erica Ruth Neubauer. Hi, Erica.
Hello.
Hi. Good to hear you. You sound great. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, and then we'll bring on Susanna Calkins, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Erica Ruth Neubauer spent 11 years in the military, nearly 2 as a Maryland police officer, and 1 as a high school English teacher before finding her way as a writer. She's been a reviewer of mysteries and crime fiction for publications such as Publishers Weekly and Mystery Scene magazine for several years, and she's a member of Sisters in Crime and Mystery Writers of America. She lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And is that where you're joining us from tonight?
It is. It is.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, and we've got Susanna Calkins, Susie, waiting in the wings. Hi, Susie.
Hi.
Good to see you. Susanna Calkins, author of the award-winning Lucy Campion series and the Speakeasy Mysteries, holds a PhD in history and teaches at the college level. Her historical mysteries have been nominated for the Mary Higgins Clark and Agatha Awards, among many others. Originally from Philadelphia, Calkins now lives in the Chicago area with her husband and 2 sons. So we have reached the point in the evening where I tell the people watching that you can put questions in the live chat on YouTube or questions here in the comments on Facebook. I have just dropped a link to both authors' books. If you're interested in purchasing copies, we have them in stock. And don't be shy with the questions. We'll get to those later on in the chat. I'm going to go away and let these 2 get to it. Thanks so much. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thanks, McKenna.
Thank you, McKenna. Boy, this is awesome.
I know.
Erica Ruth, how are you?
Susie C., how are you?
Good. So, one of the things I wanted to ask you about first is, does your series have a title? Is it the Jane Wunderlin Mysteries? Like, I feel like I don't know that specific thing. And that's what we call that, right?
Yeah,
that's what they're called.
Wunderlin Mysteries.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I sound really competent as an interviewer so far, right? I'm like, so tell me more. Like, what is the name of your book again?
It's fine. Fine.
No. I mean, I just, as I was about to say, what I was actually going to say is, do you mind saying something about like the overall series? And then I thought then we could talk a little bit more about the more specific book.
Sure. So my protagonist, Jane, is a war widow from the First World War. She's not super bummed about it. And the first book, she and her aunt, Millie, are traveling to Egypt on vacation, gets embroiled in a murder. And then the second one, she is in England. And the third, she's on a transatlantic cruise. Basically, I'm going to keep moving them around to different gonna keep moving her to different locations.
Yeah, that's super awesome. Because I'm kind of like, why did I set my books in the same place? And I can't even go to one part. Like in the other one, I just live here. So like, why didn't I think this through more?
I'm just saying.
But so tell us actually about like the premise of this current book. So what's happening in it?
So based on events at the end of book 1, which I don't want to give away, but based on
so read book 1, everybody. That's
exactly
what you have to do first. Yeah.
Some stuff is revealed, and so it made sense for them to end up in England instead of going back home to America like they'd originally planned. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and this one, it's a manor house mystery. They're staying at Lord Hughes's manor house, which is called Wedgfield Manor. It's entirely made up. You're not going to find that somewhere. And Jane's kind of bored, so she's taking flying lessons. Her cousin Lillian's playing a lot of golf. And then one of the servants, who is a veteran of the First World War, is killed. He's killed in a car accident. But it's murder.
And mystery ensues.
Exactly.
Okay, great. It's I really like, I don't think this is a spoiler to talk about the very first 2 pages of the book, but I really like that you have her in the plane in the flying lesson. Because I'm visualizing this plane from 1926 and I'm like, oh my God, you have to be like real brave to be in one of these planes. And I thought that sets to me like a lot about Jane's character, like, and then that she's bummed. I won't say why, but there's a point later on in the book where she doesn't get to have her flying lesson. And like, to me, I'm like, oh, she's tough. And you must sort of visualize her as kind of a tough person.
Yeah. Cause I mean, so that particular airplane, I did a lot of research about airplanes. That particular airplane, like the wings like detached and were pulled back so that they could like put it away. So every time you like flew it, you had to like pull the wings forward and like make sure that made me so uncomfortable. I feel like airplane wings should be attached at all times to the body of the airplane.
Well, I think we may have talked about this before, but I was researching some things about 20s planes, not to the level that but the biplanes. And then there were those people, there's all these videos, crazy videos of people doing the Charleston. Like there's a video, you just YouTube it, like of like a 10-year-old doing the Charleston on a plane in the air. And they're all just like dancing. And I'm like, that seems a little crazy.
So many people died in plane crashes during that time because they were doing crazy stuff like that.
Yeah, all that kind of like stunt stuff. And it doesn't sound like Jane is, she just wants to kind of fly because it's fun and it's kind of, Yeah. So Wedgfield Manor. So your first book was set in Egypt, and by the way, in your honor, I'm wearing the necklace, the kitty cat. It's not really a kitty cat. It's a fancy cat, Egyptian cat necklace. I don't remember getting anything from your London visits, but whatever. I
didn't go there.
Oh, so that's what I was going to ask you. So Essex. So you in your first book, the Mina House. You really that's a real place, and that's where. The mystery happens and that's really close to the pyramids and all of that. So you just mentioned that Wedgfield Manor is not a real place. So were you like imagining like typical manor houses, or how did you kind of think about that?
Yeah, so as I do with all research, I'm like, there's got to be a book about this. So I actually. Our friend Tasha had a stack of books about English manor houses, and so I poured through them, and I found one that has all like beautiful like coffee table type book with glossy pages, and so I kind of paged through and like picked elements of the ones that I liked the best, and kind of fit what I had in my head as what I kind of wanted it to look like. So that's how I picked that, and I just made it up.
Yeah, and how come Essex? Like, why? I mean.
It fit with because I had to have one of the characters go back to London, so it had to be kind of close enough to London where that would be reasonable.
Sure. Yeah, no. I mean, I think those are like those feasibility kinds of things. Like, I probably need to set it in a place that my characters can actually get in and out of, right, for sure. Yeah. I'm always wondering, like, when you come up with characters, like, how do you, like, with Jane or Redvers, do you like visualize them when you're creating them, or like, do you find personally, I find pictures of actors and actresses that I think kind of look, and I never tell anybody who they are, but like, I'm curious, do you have a picture of Jane in your mind, or Redvers? I always have to like give a little, thing when we say Redvers.
I know. I have a pretty clear picture in my mind of both of them, but I don't have like a picture, physical picture. And I was talking about this with somebody recently, and I was like, I think the closest I could come for Redvers is probably Rock Hudson.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's close, and that's not perfect.
Google Rock Hudson. I would need to like look at him for a little while. No, I know, but I have to like visualize him. Yeah. That's funny, because probably I would, if you had asked me, I probably would have thought of someone different. So that's interesting.
Who would you have said?
Well, now I'll have to think about that. I will come back to that. But like, yeah, because, but that's almost like you don't always want to know what someone else's image of a character is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think I also like, I took care not to describe too much, because I wanted them to build them in the reader's mind themselves.
Yeah, that's kind of how I tend to be with. I mean, sometimes people are like, "Well, what does your character look like?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." I mean, I remember one panel moderator one time was like, "Well, what exactly? How tall is Lucy? What is she?" And I was like, "I don't know." And I was able to get around it because 17th century London, which that character Lucy is, people don't really know what they look like. I mean, it's a funny thing unless you have paid somebody to draw you a picture, or you can look in like a basin of water. You really don't have a good sense of your own. Yeah, you don't know what you look like. So you have sort of a shimmery understanding of yourself, unless you're rich enough, someone would paint a picture of you, or draw you. Right. But yeah, you
blew my mind. I had not even thought about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things, like, as you think about it. So I was like, well, how does anybody know what anybody looks like anyway?
None of them know.
Right. But no, but I was always thinking like, it's funny. And then your covers they don't have maybe a clear picture necessarily of what they look like. But yeah, I think my covers have like an image of a character, and I'm like, oh, I guess that's what my character looks like. The artist has decided. So I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing if you have it in your mind or not.
Right.
But I find it sometimes you kind of have to just kind of remember, like, what color hair did they have, and
I know.
It's kind of
When I start writing the next one, I have like things that I need to go back and like look up and be like, did I give that person a name?
Oh yeah,
because now I need to know that.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure that like I'm writing my 6th book right now. I'm pretty sure I already have a character with this exact same name. 3 books ago. I really need to like look in my book and double check this. Yeah. But I know, right? Yeah. Don't do that.
No.
But I have learned like to have, I create just PowerPoint slides. And so I just put the pictures of things as I go. And then that way I kind of know. I learned that after like several books. But now I'm like, oh, that's what they look like. Oh, that's okay. It's so I can remember people and their names. It's just an easier. It's just it's like, oh yeah, but it took me like several books to start realizing that might be a good, helpful way to keep track of things.
Yeah, it is.
Well, so your books, your first book is set in Egypt, your second one's in England, and your third one is a transatlantic cruise, which is really awesome. And it's the Queen Mary? It's not the Queen. Like you took a Queen Mary.
I took a transatlantic cruise on the Queen Mary too. But I set the book on the Olympic, which was the sister ship to the Titanic.
That's right. The one that survived, I guess. Yeah. Yes. I guess that's not the end of that story. That would be real quick right there. No end of the series. Sorry, spoiler.
Whoops.
So how did you like pick those locations? Like, were you, I mean, I see now like, oh, I want to travel here and I can do that. But like, how did you like pick Egypt? And then how did you pick Essex? And then why a transatlantic? Like, what's your thinking as you pick stories, locations?
So the first one really came because I have been kind of obsessed with Egypt since I was a girl. And like, I also was raised on like old black and white movies and old Agatha Christie and Masterpiece Mystery. Somewhere along the way, I picked up super romantic ideas about Egypt in the 1920s specifically. So when I sat down to write a book, I was like, that's when I want to set it. But I didn't want to do like Amelia Peabody. I mean, nobody can touch Amelia Peabody. So I didn't want to make her an archaeologist and make it a series set in Egypt. Mm-hmm. I didn't think I had the tools for that. So I decided to move it around. So because of the stuff that happened in book 1, England was a natural progression. Book 3, I thought a boat would just be like a transatlantic cruise would be fun. It seems like one of those glamorous 1920s things that people did. And then the 4th one, which I am hoping to start working on, I'm basically looking for that one. I'm looking for an artifact.
Okay.
And so based on the artifact is where I think it's going to be set.
Okay, nice. Awesome. That's exciting. Okay, cool. No, I love that. I mean, I just think, and plus I think it was genius to kind of even figure this out in the first place. But I was curious, like how, just why those specific regions and how you're thinking about it. But that's the other question is just how did you pick 1926? Like how, like, I mean, it sounds like maybe the movies influenced you, but like why the 20s? And
I really like the 20s. I like the fact that I think women were pushing against the social strictures of the time. I think it was really socially interesting. After the war, after the pandemics of the 1917, 1918. I think that's when those were. You're the historian. I dates.
Yeah, sure.
I also think it really evokes, like, the 1920s are so evocative of so many mental pictures that it's easy to just it's so easily set up. It's immediately flappers and booze and that kind of stuff. So I don't know, it's a fun time. Why did you pick 1920s?
Yeah, same. I mean, there was a little part of me that picked, so that's my second series, Speakeasy Mysteries, set 1929 Chicago. I mean, I live, an hour from you. I live outside Chicago. And, for me, just, it is a very lived thing here in Chicago. I mean, I grew up in Philadelphia. They had Prohibition and, all of that too, but you wouldn't know it. I mean, in Philadelphia, it's all colonial history and Liberty Bell and Rocky, all that stuff. But it isn't a pronounced thing like it is in Chicago. And I remember just feeling like, I really like this time period and I like the Chicago part of it. Like I like the city part. And, so that was just really fun to kind of explore, the whole like cocktails and crime and, what it would be like. And for me, it's always like, what would it be like to be a real person during this time who is not rich, who has to work for a living? And like, what would that really be like? And so my character, in that series is working in a speakeasy and she's not a rich person and she has to get a job. And so like, what that really like? So for me, it's about like thinking about like the daily lives of people and especially women in particular. But we, I think Milwaukee has some great, 20s history too. And Prohibition. Do you ever think about like, is Jane going to come back and do a little mixing it up in Milwaukee at all?
No.
Yeah.
I do plan on doing one in the States at some point. So.
Okay. Well, I think we talked about this. So my book is set in 1929. I think I said that my speakeasy, the Third Door, was around for, even though Gina doesn't start working there till 29, so it's around. Right. So I was like, well, there could be like some crossover, combination where Jane and, Gina meet, like, in some way. Would they get on? How would they do?
I think Jane get along.
Yeah, me too.
I think Gina's younger than Jane.
Yeah. See, now that we have to do some hard author math right now, because your book is set in 26. How old is Jane Wunderlin in 26? See, it's hard writer math, right?
It is.
And Gina is 25 in 1929. So she was born in 1904, if I have done my writer math correctly.
I think in 1926, Jane is in her late 20s, if not 30. I think she might be 29.
So they're the same age. Close. They're pretty close.
Wait, so if Jane's 29, oh my God, we're not doing this. I think
the end. I'm sorry, McKenna, this is over now. This is our writer, this is writer math. Well, speaking of writer math, you and I share something very similar. That you and I have a very similar way of approaching writing. Tell me how you think about writing, because you and I have a great. I mean, it's the best way, clearly. But how do you think about, like, actually when you're building your manuscript and thinking about how long a book is and what your writing style is?
Well, now I do what is called Susie math.
It's helpful, right?
It is. It is, because when you're like 20,000 words in, you're like halfway done.
That's right. Oh, gosh, you're like totally done at that point. Well, because I think, like, my always thinking was, okay, so the book needs to be 80,000 words. 40,000 is half. And then when you're writing, you don't have the first draft. So 20,000 is about halfway, but really you're more like at 10. And so, pretty much when you've written 5,000 or even 2,500 words, you're like most of the way done the book. Yeah. So optimism.
I like how it works out.
Yeah. And I think, it seems to work every time. So it's just because so you have now you have 3 books done because your third one is with the editor. It's coming out next year, but you have 3 finished and you're working on the 4th. Yeah. And now you're in that funny stage of having the first one out and been nominated for some awards, which is super exciting. And then you're talking about this one, but you are editing or maybe past the 3rd one, now writing the 4th one. So you're kind of doing a lot all at once. Is it hard to keep track?
It is hard to keep. I think I want to just take a minute and explain to the people that what we were talking about with Susie Math. The way I write a draft, and I think you do this too, is I write a very short first draft. And then I go back and I layer in more detail. Because the first draft for me is always just dialogue and action. Is that how you do it?
It depends. I do a lot of add stuff here. I put it in parentheses. So sometimes I'll say add important dialogue between these characters. And it's just because if I'm writing and I'm trying to get through. But yeah, definitely. I think I focus on plot more, trying to get the plot of the story. And then I go back and add the layers of details. And I definitely don't get hung up on the historical as I go. I'll say, I need to look this back up. Yep. You reference period things like a thermos in your book. And it's and I know, you probably would say, oh, let me just double check that a thermos is actually historically accurate, which it is. And, you might not have stopped to look it up otherwise, or, that kind of thing.
Make sure
that's what I do too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that by the time I go back, I usually have a 60,000 word draft. And then I go back and then I add in layers and layers in revisions until I have something close to 80,000 words, which is what our genre is typically.
Yeah. Did you, although I think I always turn mine in around 75, but then by the time it's got those last couple,
exactly.
That's fine. We just
totally fine.
We're always reassuring each other on all of these things.
Yeah.
So did you always know you wanted to be a writer? I mean, I know that you have, other things in your background, you were an English teacher. I mean, my gosh, you have a crazy resume. Every time I hear it, I'm like, oh my gosh, a cop and, and all the things. And did you also get blown out of a cannon? I feel like that should have happened in your life. But you were an English teacher and I know you did nonfiction things like writing book reviews and things like that. But how did you think about fiction? Did you always want to write? Were you writing short stories? Or tell us about your background as a writer.
I have always wanted to write. I just never either had a good enough idea. In my 20s, I remember writing down oh, you could write a story about this, or you could write, and I never did anything beyond jotting down some notes. And I never I don't think I ever wrote short stories. I never took creative writing. I never did any of that. So I did NaNoWriMo, the writing thing in November. I did that once, a couple of years. I think even before I met anyone in the mystery community. And it was terrible. It was just to prove to myself that I could write 50,000 words. It didn't make any sense. So sitting down and writing Mina House was the first time I really sat down and tried to write write something for real.
Yeah. Oh, but how long did it take you? See, now I'm super jealous. Like, why? How long did that actually take to sit down and write it?
So the first draft took me 7 weeks.
Okay, now I'm in a whole new category. You mean, wait, that the first draft of my award-winning or award-nominated took me just 7 weeks. That's awesome.
Yeah, but like I had to revise it like 11 times.
Well, yeah,
like,
but revising.
I rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it. Like it needed so much work.
Although now, of course, I'm just thinking Susie math. So it took you 7 weeks to complete, what, 60,000 words, 70,000 words? So
Sure.
Was it like you were done in a day by our math standards?
Yes, I wrote that in one day. No, by the time I sat down to write it, it just poured out. Like it just poured out. And I like nothing I've written since has come that easily.
Mm-hmm.
So
but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, the interesting thing is for you, the world is a little different. Like for me, my world stays more or less the same in each series. Like,
right.
You know, I mean, obviously months pass and, you know, but the culture, political, gender, all this, you know, social things are happening and I've created that world. But for you, the world is the characters that world goes with them to these new settings, that's what I think is actually extremely interesting to look at 1920s from different perspectives. I mean, like you have Egypt in the 1920s is going to be really different from Essex, England in 1920s. And then, well, I don't know, transatlantic cruise, that's probably got a lot of, you know, who knows what's on that. You know, I have no idea. But I mean, to me, that's like a really interesting thing to even like bring the world of the characters and like move that into different places and see like how does their understanding of the 20s maybe get changed by the location that they're in, because she has to adapt, right? Like she's not exactly the same person she is in Egypt because she's a different person. I would say my feeling is she's different. How did you think about that? Like, were you kind of consciously thinking like, how is Jane going to be in Egypt, and then how is Jane going to be here in this manor house in England? And you know, because she kind of says like, well, now I'm reading all day long and it's different.
Right. You know, I guess I really didn't think about that. I mean, I really thought about how I wanted her to grow as a character. Like I definitely wanted like a character arc for her, but I guess I didn't really think about how she would. Probably should have.
I mean, I think it was really great. I mean, it's like who she is. And then that's exactly how it is. She's like, she's not been in Egypt very long. She doesn't live there. It's not a permanent location. She's a visitor. And that's exactly like, so it's her world she's experiencing. And then she goes to England and because she's not British either. And so she's like experiencing this. And then, you know, so to me, that's actually really interesting that she's bringing the world each place that she goes. Yeah.
I mean, I may have made this much more difficult for myself than I needed to, but like,
but a lot of the characters are the same. I mean, there's like or at least a few of the characters are the same. So that that's what I was thinking. Like, that's the nice thing about writing a series is you're not restarting the world each time. Like that seems harder to kind of have to think about that. You kind of are.
I have to say, like, and people were very disappointed. I have some people who were actually mad at me. Book 3, Millie's not in it. Look at your face.
No, I'm just kidding. Just using you.
Yeah, she only makes a
shame
cameo. Everyone loves Millie. She only makes a cameo. She'll be back in book 4. But
I was gonna say that's what book 4 is for. You know, I mean, I actually think it's really interesting when characters come and go. I mean, and sometimes you can't have all the characters. And like I don't know anything about the book other than it's set on a transatlantic cruise. I mean, maybe they can't all come on the cruise.
I couldn't figure out a way. Like, there didn't make any sense given what they were doing.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but I get that. But that actually just means that they really like that character and that she can come back and join them. I mean, but it is an interesting thing. Did you get any other kind of feedback that you're like, like, you know, reader questions that you kind of say, oh.
No, that was like, I was like, I'm really sorry. It was friends of mine too. We're so mad about it.
Well, you can bring her back. I mean, that's definitely. I mean, that is the nice thing. yeah. Or you can cross her over with my book and, bring my
Exactly.
characters in.
Exactly.
So, a few years ago, when you mentioned you were working on this book specifically, you said you were still writing Mina House, and you said, I said, what's going to be in the next book? Where are you going to be? And you said, I don't know, but I know the whole book is going to focus on golf. And I don't like golf. Golf is really boring.
Yeah.
And I was like, so Erica, why are you going to focus a book on golf if you think it's boring and you don't like it? And you're like, I don't know, I have to. So I was really intrigued when I picked this up because I was like, how much golf is going to be in this book? And it's actually not that much. And is it, there is, she does play golf and, and one of the characters, but like,
Jane doesn't play golf.
Yeah, Jane, exactly. I really like page 5, it's like, Jane's like, I don't like golf. I don't like sports. I don't like anything, but I like to fly my plane. So what happened with the golf? How did you bring that in?
This is a trap. This is where I set myself a trap because in book 1, I had Lillian be a golfer because I wanted to mention the fact that there was really a golf course in Egypt in the desert at that hotel, because it's true. And I wanted to mention it. And then because Lillian is in the second book and we're at her home, it had to be about golf.
Although I was like, well, it's not really about golf. Golf is mentioned. So I thought you did a really good job with it. In explaining it and working it in as part of the story. But it was so funny because I was like, I don't understand why you want to write about something that you're bored by. Like,
you're 100% correct. I remember that conversation too. And I was like, she's right. I shouldn't write about golf. And I did it anyway.
Like, oh well. But I don't know. Let's see, I think, so I have another question. So do you ever see yourself in any of these characters? Not necessarily Jane. Do you think that there is any like autobiographical elements, not like details, but like, do you find like your sensibility, or do you find yourself, being these characters, or do you think your sense of self comes out in these characters? I'm just curious, like, do you see that at all?
I think it does in Jane quite a bit. Like, I've had people read it and then we're like, there's a lot of you in Jane, or a lot of Jane in you, whichever way that goes. And I think that's fair. I didn't think I was doing that when I wrote it, but I think it was probably inevitable. She and I both drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah, I noticed that. I like the coffee. And you got some gin rickeys in there, which also happens to be my favorite cocktail. So it's good.
I like the gin rickey. Although I am drinking a Yingling this evening.
Oh, Pennsylvania. Nice.
From Pennsylvania, and so are you.
Oh, thank you. And what's the interesting thing about the Yingling? I know all kinds of ridiculous facts about Yingling. Should I just tell you about the Yingling Brewery really quick?
Please do.
We just to say that they are like the oldest brewery, I think in Pennsylvania, one of the oldest in the country, but they changed over to ice cream during Prohibition. And so there is a Yingling ice cream, and they still have it, and it's quite delicious.
Oh.
Yes. And so, but they went back. And I think Milwaukee breweries also switch over to ice cream. At least one of them did.
Yep. That was a way to get around. No, so but I want to ask you, do you do that? Do you see stuff of yourself, not stuff, but like, do you see yourself in some of your characters?
Yeah, same as you. I didn't really mean for that to happen, but in some ways I would say that both my main characters, Lucy Campion for the 17th century and then Gina Ricci in 1929, they probably both represent something a little aspirational for me. Like Lucy is like she's a tough, I think they're both tougher than me. And because I'm always like, if I see like a dead body, I'm going the other way, first of all. Like, I'm not like exploring anything. So in that sense, they're like way tougher.
Really? You wouldn't? Okay.
Well, I might, but I'm pretty sure I would not go up to the cops surrounding like a dead body and say, well, tell me more about what's happening here. Like, like amateur sleuths always do.
I suppose. If I was
involved, but you were a cop though.
I would.
Yeah, and you have cop eyes.
I know.
It's scary. But for me, it's not conscious, but I can tell sometimes I'm like, I feel like they're versions, like not better versions of myself, but maybe tougher or stronger versions of myself. And that,
fair.
but I'm sure some of it's the way I would interact. So,
That's fair.
So I don't know, McKenna, do you want to, are there like any questions or things that you want to bring in? We're happy to.
Yes, ma'am. There are some questions. So we have a question, a very important question from early on. Holly West wants to know, and you have posed this exactly timed right.
I know, it's ridiculous. Sadly, I'm not drinking. I know it looks awful. I have my kitty cat glass in one hand because it's got kitty cats on it. And then my cocktail. This is actually it's sparkling water because I was like, I have to drink a little water, but I can't just drink it in a regular glass. So it looks terrible. I'm like, it's Susie the Two-Fisted Drinker. But I didn't have any fixins for some cocktails tonight because I don't have I don't have the bar that's described by Erica Ruth in her book. Like that, what do you have at the table? The cart?
A rolling cart, yeah.
A rolling cart, which always sounds so awesome. Like, let's just roll the bar in. I'll roll out with the bar.
Right?
But yeah, so I don't have that. I only have some wine around.
I feel like it would just be one more thing to clean.
Yeah. It would get dusty between the bottles. Oh, disaster.
Yeah.
So sticky.
The crystal would show the dust. Yeah.
You know, this is why I don't think I would actually do that well in like the 20s when you have to be like all sparkly and fancy. I feel like, oh, I'm tired of this.
Okay, we have a question. I think you've already kind of talked a little bit about this, Erica, but Kathy wanted to know, do you have other locations in mind that you're excited about getting to?
I do.
It sounds like a secret.
It does, doesn't it? I had been thinking I would take a book for to Greece, but I think actually I'm going to end up taking it to maybe outside of Istanbul. Look at Susie. I know. Do you want to go?
And then we can go and visit. I'm going to go on a retreat with. This is all about me. Like she's talking about her book, and it's really like I will come with you to do research in Istanbul.
Perfect.
Do it. Like declare it here.
Okay. I think I found what I'm looking for. So I think I want to do it there. I don't really have locations picked that I want to go to. I more have like, as long as Kensington continues the series, I have ideas of like subjects I want to cover, and then hopefully I can put them in. Like the spiritualist movement of the 20s, I think is really interesting. There's a lot of weird occult stuff happening. I don't know if that's too heavy, but like,
I think that I mean, of course, I'm always really interested in that, but that is a whole thing. You're totally right. I mean, the occultism, I think they actually called it that, like in the 20s. It's fascinating. Totally do that. Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, just so you know, like different regions have different, like cocktails aren't even allowed in some countries because it's like that American thing. Yes, I know. Like when you research which country, like pick which one's on which side of the cocktail war, because Italy also is like very anti-cocktail. Like Mussolini declares it as there's wars on cocktail. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there were like people were still sneaking them in, but Italy was like, we're too fancy for cocktails. And,
well, we're not going to Italy.
Yeah, I know. They actually banned cocktail. I mean, in a way that was different because it wasn't socially acceptable to have cocktails like in the US where it's like, we'll have a speakeasy and drink them because there's prohibition. In Italy, it's like, of course we're not going to drink that swill that the US So it wasn't even like they're going to have speakeasies there. So just in case, you need to have this information as you're picking your country.
I also want to do something about vaudeville. I think that would be fun to write about too, right?
That would be fun. Yeah.
This is stuff like I want to research, basically. I want to buy a bunch of books and read about.
Yep, that's pretty much how I do. Like all of my books, like have a. I don't know. It's not a theme because that makes it sound too heavy, but it is. It's basically that. It's like, what do I find super interesting about which time period, and then I just focus on that. Or it's like a question, and I'm like, how do people smuggle? How do they actually smuggle alcohol in that nobody saw it? Like, what were the actual ways that they did that? Like, what would that actually be like to carry a flask tied to your thigh, or like, I mean, like, what would that feel like? So, that's what drives me in these 20s books. I did practice that, by the way. I tied a whole thing around my leg to see how hard that would be. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Like I could, because I was like, how could someone do this? And then I was like, yeah, they totally could.
You're my favorite.
You also have to make sure that, like, whatever topic you choose, you can live with it for that long 7-week period of writing the book.
said anything.
I know. Oh my god, that's hilarious. Oh my god.
Otherwise, my first much longer.
My first book, Murder at Roseman's Gate, took me 10 years to write. I mean, and I was just writing it in and out, and like I didn't, But so I was like, how long was that book? Because I remember when you hadn't written, like all of a sudden you had written, So it wasn't a long time in there.
Well, I also wasn't working full time, and I also I knew, because I'd been around the industry, I knew that you have a year, once you've written a book and you sell it, after that you have to pump out a book a year. So I set myself, you have to write this in a year to prove that you can do it, because that's how you have to do it going forward. Yeah. So I set myself those parameters.
I only thought I was ever going to write one book, so I thought this will be my book. So I put everything in it. I thought that was done. Then I got offered a 2-book deal, and I was like, what? Seriously, what do you do with this? I mean, it's a good problem to have, but it was like when you put everything into your first book, it's like, and now I have to stretch it out. So,
yeah.
Well, you did good.
Yeah. So we have another question. You've just talked about research, but how much research is done to get the aspects of daily life correct for the time period of your books? And clearly that applies to both of you. Why don't you start this time, Susie?
Yeah.
I do spend a lot of time. I do like the daily life things. I mean, I had studied in my past, sort of big social, cultural, gender trends, things like that. But the actual daily life, I had to get in and read a lot from the time period. And so for my 17th century books, there's these things called early English books, and they're these early new. It's like penny press. It's this cheap ephemeral stuff that's tabloid news. It's half accurate, half lies. But I studied that. I mean, so you can also get witches with 2 heads and things like that in the middle of it. But there's a lot of information you can get about daily life. And for my 20s books, I did read every edition of the Chicago Tribune to kind of understand what people were thinking about, and to understand slang. And I watched some movies. That's totally different to be able to do that in the 20s, stuff, because there's so much things on YouTube, and it's real things, and how to use a telephone. I mean, I had to watch a commercial on, because people in 1927, they were still figuring out you don't always have a switchboard, but sometimes you have a switchboard, and there were all these things about how to actually use a phone. So they had before movies and theaters, they had a commercial from Bell, here's how you use a telephone. And just I found that fascinating. It was so helpful. But anyway, so I don't know, Erica, how about you, when you think about sort of the daily life kind of details, how do you think about that?
Same. I did a lot of, I also read up a lot and try to do as much research as possible. I would like to be as accurate as possible. So and because mine are traveling, I was looking for actual menus and what is on that ship? What are the menus that they had at the Mina House? I read a couple of books about just life in England during that time. So, I mean, I do try to be as accurate as possible.
Did you have to research Mahjong? Because I felt I really have no idea. People always talk about Mahjong, and I had no idea. And you wrote it in what they were doing. So you just know
one of those books.
Yeah.
And there was this whole thing about how it was super popular. It was sweeping the nation. Yeah. I was I'll just add this in.
I know. Well, see, now we have to play, so I don't even know how to play, and we'll pretend we'll be all 20s and try this out. And everybody's invited. You can all come and play Mahjong.
Erin is our hero, and she has figured out that Jane would be 32 in 1929. So,
boom! Thank you.
So she's so much older than you said.
She's a bit older.
She's 7 years older than Gina.
I think they would have a sisterly relationship.
Yeah, I think they would have fun. Yeah.
Okay.
How long would we have just sat here? Okay.
Really?
I mean, look, I had a joke ready for 7 weeks, and then I was gonna say I had a question and just ask you something math. But I figured that would just be mean.
Yeah, a little. You ever see 2 writers just kind of start to cry? That'll happen here.
My favorite was when you go, McKenna, the event's over. I was just sitting back here listening. Oh god! All right. So let's see. Kathy had another question. This one's specifically for Susie. With the time in between the 4th and 5th Lucy books, I'm wondering what the future holds for the schedule of Lucy and Gina books.
That's
So it's like the time, meaning like when the publication time, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
there's only 3 months between them.
No, like pub date. I mean,
I
schedule.
was really lucky that another publisher, Severn House, picked up my Lucy series. So I had 4 with Minotaur, St. Martin's Minotaur, with the first 4 Lucy, and that last one came out in 2016. And then Severn House did pick up 2 more. So the next one's coming out next February. And then in between then, when I didn't know, what was this, Minotaur asked me to write another series. So that's where I had started with the 2 Gina. I'm sort of like in between contracts there. So I don't know, honestly, if I'll get another Gina contract, but I've really learned never say you never really know, because I honestly thought Lucy was over. So I'm actually pretty grateful that Severn House did give me this opportunity, because as a writer, it's a little sad. You feel kind of bad. I mean, it was a really weird and a little creepy, I will say, to have this feeling that Lucy was waiting for me to continue her story, because I didn't leave it in a space that I thought it was done. I left it open. Like the mystery's solved, just so you know, like the mystery's always solved, but I left open like a love interest kind of thing. And I left open Lucy's trajectory in book 4 and book 5. I thought I was only going to get 1 book more, because they only gave me it was a 1 contract, then another contract. That book is called The Sign of the Gallows. And I have Lucy, it's all about a body at a crossroads, and crossroads were these magical places in 17th century where ghosts hid and, latched on to people and that kind of thing. I mean, only people who believe that. Lucy didn't believe that. But the concept of the crossroads, my whole image of writing that book was Lucy is at the crossroads, and I was going to send her in a direction. But then I was just finishing up that book when the Severn House offered me another contract. I was like, oh, she's no longer at the crossroads anymore. So I got 1 more book. And I think this is the 6th book, is the end. And I'm literally finishing up the edits of the end. A little sad, but I feel like I will have successfully finished that one, just in case it's over. I mean, I still could continue if it isn't, but I feel better. So yeah, it was a weird feeling to feel like I had left these characters and they were waiting for me. That's a creepy, weird feeling that I think other writers could understand. Like what was happening to these characters when you weren't hanging out with them? And normally I'm not that kind of person. I was like, it's weird.
I certainly have talked to a lot of authors this past year on here, and it's amazing how many have kind of woo-woo things. It's like more than not. So I think it's pretty standard.
Oh, good. And I like the technical term.
Woo-woo moments. Okay. And we have a question for you, Erica. Could you give us a title of one of the books about life in England at the time? And Susie, you may have another research. I'm going to take those eyes as a no.
I can look for you, Kathy, and let you know. They're in this room back here. There's a stack of them. I don't remember.
I got this great one. I'll just take us off the hook.
You will do that.
It's called Sex in the British. I was like, this is awesome. Like, this may be really helpful one day. So I actually got it for our friend Lori Rader Day, who has a book coming out set at Greenway, Agatha Christie's home. And it's set during World War II, and it's coming out this year. It's going to be awesome. But I was like, I found this book at a book sale. I'm sorry, it was not at a bookstore. I feel like I need to apologize for finding it. But yeah, I was like, they really do. They had sex, and there's a whole book that says this. I said, I was Erica while you were running off to get your prop. I was saying I got it for Lori, and then she's like, I'm not putting sex in my book. So that's our friend Lori Rader Day I was talking about.
But I want to read that.
Yeah.
So I have both The Long Weekend.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And The Daily Life in the United States. Cameras are hard, you guys. Daily Life in the United States, 1940. Do you?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have I think, and then I have. Yeah, I have a bunch of 20s books.
Yeah. But this especially is the one that I got a lot of it stuff out of for book 2. The Long Weekend.
Can you hold that one? Can you hold that one up again? The Long Weekend. Cool.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty dense history, history read. But I did get a lot of good stuff out of it.
Nice. we have more age discussion. Aaron says if the Gina book is set in 29 and Jane in 26, isn't Jane only 4 years older?
I'm just giving up here. Like, I'm sure Aaron's right. Like, we're gonna like review.
You know what?
Like, I'm never watching this part again.
Yeah, exactly. I told you guys we can edit things out ahead of time. I just didn't expect it to be a running gag about pages.
Erica, I feel like we're not showing up well here.
We are English people.
Okay.
Not math people.
Okay. If any one of our friends are watching and have more questions, pop them on here. I'm going to ask one of my favorite questions, which is, what books did you read in your formative years? And was there a single book that made you think, I want to be a writer? And I don't care who goes first.
Ooh.
You can go, Erica.
I loved Nancy Drew. Like, I remember when I was in second grade, my mom handed me my first Nancy Drew book, and it was The Secret at Shadow Ranch. Mm-hmm. And that started a whole thing where I would get so excited on birthdays and Christmas where people would buy me new ones and I would add them to my collection. I read all of them in the library. And that's what I think really started my love affair with mysteries. I mean, also my dad watched, which is interesting because he was a cop, but he loved mysteries. He didn't read, but he just consumed everything mystery on TV. So we grew up with that too. I was obsessed with Remington Steele when I was in third grade.
Oh, who was it? Is he read first?
I know, right? Listen. Yeah, I can't think of anything specifically that made me want to write. But yeah, Nancy Drew was really big for me. And then Agatha Christie too. I started reading those when I was probably in sixth grade.
Yeah.
I started cruising through those. So
I mean, I have a very similar, Nancy Drew for sure. And, I was definitely The Secret of the Old Clock and all that. And then for me, Agatha Christie also, I remember around 11, 12. And I remember being saving babysitting money to be able to go to the bookstore, B. Dalton's back then, in Philadelphia after school and getting a book for $2.50, and I would get an Agatha Christie every week if I could. I was always saving my babysitting money for that. But I would say what made me want to be a writer, and unlike Eric, I was probably writing little scribbly stories all the time. I was always kind of scribbling stuff. But then when I went to college, it beat the creativity out of me. But when I was in grad school, my mother would read, would tell me about books she was reading, and she read a lot of Anne Perry and Charles Todd. And they actually became I remember reading, I was people write historical mysteries. And I was what? I had always been, it was this whole clicking thing. I was I could do this. I mean, I never thought I'd be writing like them. They're pretty amazing writers, but I felt it was a pretty neat moment. And actually Holly West, who's on the call, was there moderating my very first panel of BoucherCon, which is our mystery convention. And I got to be on this panel with Anne Perry, and I actually think maybe Charles Todd or someone too. And I remember Holly was so kind. She's I'll sit you next to Anne Perry. And I was oh my God. It was actually it was a pretty neat moment, to come to that point of oh my gosh. But I could not possibly tell her that she had been this inspiration, but I was kind of thinking. And then Charles Todd, it's actually Caroline Todd, Charles is also quite kind, but Caroline is a very sweet and kind person. And I remember telling her, and she was just oh, it's so nice. I love it. And I was people can be really nice, mystery writers. And it was very inspiring. I would say Caroline Todd was quite inspiring to me.
Caroline's a delight.
Yeah, I will say, I remember when I realized I wanted to write a historical mystery was when I was sitting on my back porch with my best friend, Beth. And we were drinking and reading, that's how we spend afternoons, is each reading a different book. And I was reading Ashley Weaver's Murder at the Brightwell. And I kept putting it down and going, I want to write something like this. I love this. Yeah. And then actually we ended up having a whole discussion about characters that I would write and who Jane would be. And then we were laughing really hard and getting kind of rowdy. And my neighbors got mad and slammed their windows shut on us.
And now you and Ashley are friends.
And now we are friends. It's very weird. The same agent, which was also very
weird.
Super weird.
So obviously the writer's world is a small and kind one. Are there any books that you've read recently that you want to give a shout out to? I will say Ashley Weaver's first in new series, Peculiar Combination, is
Ooh, I haven't read that.
wonderful. It's out next month, I believe. It's a May thing. We have an event scheduled for her, so if you like historical mysteries, it's coming up. But have you read and loved anything recently?
I have. I read the last one I can remember that I really loved was Fortune Favors the Dead.
Yeah.
By Stephen Spotswood. I thought that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Had such a vibe. So good.
I'm just gonna, because I have it here. I really, really like June Her's The Silence of Bones. She is a fabulous writer, and I just read this recently. I loved it. Really, really great. I think it's a series, which I was super excited because when you read one, you're like, I really hope there's more. And then I was like, I think there is a second one. It just hasn't been written. Write faster. See, we can be like that too. Like, write faster. Why isn't his book isn't done yet? What are you doing all day? Why are you talking to people? You should be writing.
Yeah. I know that feeling. I should be reading, not writing.
I think it's always that feeling. I mean, and there's just so many books. I mean, we have so many friends, and not just friends, but like people, people put out really amazing books all the time. And then you hear a great suggestion. You're like, I really want to read that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I think we have come to the end of our evening. Lots of positive feedback in the comments. People have enjoyed it. You guys have been delightful, as I knew you would be. And I guess that's all. I put a link in the comments to the Stephen Spotswood because I know people will like that. Susie, what was the name of your book again that you recommended?
It was called The Silence of Bones by June Her.
Okay, perfect.
And I don't know if it's considered YA because the protagonist is about 16, but I think anybody could read this. It is incredibly mature writing. It's beautiful writing. It's really well done. I highly, highly recommend it.
Nice.
Well, I'm going to drop that link in here too because it has been requested. So give me 2 seconds and then I'll be back with you guys to sign off. All right, there we go. Okay, so anyway, your books are already linked and highly recommended. So if you're considering ordering them, we hope you can start ordering them from us. Thank you both so much. Susie, thank you for coming on as a guest moderator also tonight. I know it's
sure.
It is a job and you did a great job with it. I hope you enjoy your wine and your cocktail. And
we'll just keep continuing. The weekend has started for me. This is how it goes.
And Erica, congrats on another book. We're loving the series and wish you all the best. Thanks to everyone watching, and I'm going to sign us all off. Good night.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, McKenna.